Hey, what's good? My name is Avery Taylor, and you are watching the Larger Than Logic podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about boundaries, and I think it's important to talk to you about boundaries because if you're anything like me, I know at some point in your life, if not now, you're probably still struggling to enforce your boundaries healthily with the people that you love, your wife. I don't know how old your kids are. My baby is tiny, so we haven't crossed that bridge yet. But you might find yourself in this situation with not even just your wife, not even just your kids, your coworkers, your friends, what have you. Boundaries are hard. Boundaries are not easy to navigate. And sometimes even setting our own boundaries, knowing what that looks like in a healthy manner, we don't know. A lot of us, it was not exemplified for us, and we're trying to figure all of this out. And so I thought it'd be cool to come to you, you know what I'm saying, and hopefully give you a couple tools, give you a couple things that you can use that would make this concept just a little bit more clear for you in your day-to-day life, my guy. The main thing that you need to understand is that there are two types of boundaries. There's only two types of boundaries. There's good boundaries and there's bad boundaries. There are good boundaries that can keep you safe, and then there's bad boundaries that can keep you trapped, okay? There's no in between. There's either good boundaries or there's bad boundaries, my man. To make this a little bit more clear to you, see, boundaries are kind of like locking yourself in a room, right? Locking yourself in a room, it can protect you. If there's somebody trying to rob you or somebody trying to harm you, it can keep the bad person out, right? If you have valuables, you have a lot of money, a lot of jewelry, a lot of, things that are high ticket items, it will help you protect those resources, right? But at the same time, locking yourself in that room could also be dangerous, especially if you lose the key and you're not in control, right? If you are sick or you are having an allergic reaction, you can't breathe, it might be a little bit harder for an EMT, a paramedic, for help to get to you, right? Say there's a fire or a gas leak on the inside, you need to exit at a fast pace. If you can't get out of that locked room in enough time, that could be fatal, right? It is the exact same thing with boundaries. There are good boundaries that can protect you, right? They can protect you emotionally. They can protect you in terms of staying focused and staying clear. But there's also bad boundaries that will keep you trapped in a cycle of unproductive happenstances, unproductive relationship, unproductive communication, unproductive time spent, and not even just unproductive, but things that can actually set you further back rather than help you continue to move forward in terms of the purpose that God's placed in your life and the things and responsibilities that have been entrusted to you. Now, when it comes to this conversation of, healthy boundaries or good boundaries versus bad boundaries, the best advice that I could give you that has worked for me is that you have to let your boundaries be built around God's purpose on your life and also the goals that you have previously set up, right? It cannot and it can never, ever be built on your trauma. A lot of times people talk about boundaries this, boundaries that. The whole time, all they are doing is looking for an excuse to stay hurt, stay weak, stay feeble, stay brittle, stay fragile, and never actually deal with their mess. The thing about it is, if you have boundaries protecting your weaknesses and your weaknesses only, inevitably, the more pressure that comes and sits on your shoulders as life goes on will break you. And the thing about it is, you may be able to get this person or that person to respect your boundaries. If you have unaware people in your life who cannot see through that crap, you might actually find enough individuals to make you think that the way that you are acting and carrying yourself is rational. But the thing about it is, life does not care about how you feel. Avery cares about how you feel. I would love for you to live a comfortable and cool life. But the fact of the matter is, especially as leaders, as heads of our household, we cannot function through that mental model and through that expectation that the world is this kind place that just respects every one of our boundaries and preferences and X, Y, Z, especially when they're built around things that honestly need to be worked on and not necessarily protected, and then be surprised when the world does not reward us for believing that lie. Boundaries need to be built around protecting your relationship with Christ, your calling that Christ has put in your life, and then your purpose, what you've been set on this earth to do, the goals that you set, the milestones that you're trying to hit, the legacy that you're trying to set up for your family. If this is a little bit difficult to wrap your head around in terms of how to go about it in a beneficial manner, here's 3 guidelines you can use that will help you be able to tell if you're setting good boundaries, bad boundaries, what have you. The first thing is this: your boundaries should not only show up when you're in your feelings. All right. Your boundaries should not only be showing up when you're upset and you're mad and you're pissed off. Okay. If when you're upset, it just so happens that, oh, you don't feel like talking, or you don't want to talk about this, or you don't want to talk about that, you stop being able to communicate yourself intelligibly, or intelligently rather, to the individuals that are honestly working with you, not trying to hurt you, not trying to harm you, but just so may have happened. If when you're upset, you at that point decide that you're not going to communicate, you're going to put a wall up and attempt to keep people out, right? Attempt to keep your wife out, attempt to keep your kids out. That's not healthy, that's not productive, and that's not cool. That's not what a real man should do. Have we all been there at times? Have our emotions got the best of us? 10,000%. I don't want to make you feel like anybody is perfect, right? I'm just saying that that's not the goal. That's not normal. That's not cool. A lot of other people might endorse you and say, hey, when you're upset, it is what it is. Nah, that's an excuse. And that's how mediocrity sets into families. We don't do that mess. You get in your feelings and now you're intentionally ignoring the needs of your family. You don't want to help with your kids no more. You don't want to help with homework. You don't want to make sure that they fed and clean. You don't want to be somebody that your wife can lean on because she's emotionally not where she needs to be or is having a hard time regulating. You don't want to be a sounding board. You don't want to answer questions. You don't want to plan. Like, come on, bruh. You have to be an adult about this mess. You have to be responsible about this mess. And regardless of what's going on, you have to be loving about this mess, all right? Boundaries should not be coming up, and walls should not just be coming up because you're in your feelings. Your purpose and your responsibility is far too great to be letting something as minuscule as your feelings being hurt for a second, just for a moment, to be the thing that lets you continue in this path of inconsistency in terms of showing up for your family. That's a bad boundary. That's a bad boundary, and a boundary that nobody should respect. Now, will people respect it? I'm not gonna lie. We fight for a lot of dumb things sometimes, and people validate us. So I'm not gonna say that people won't, respect it. I'm just saying that I don't believe, and I don't even think that you believe that that is a wise or good boundary to set. And then also on the other side, right? Your boundaries should not disappear just because you're feeling good and things are going well in your relationship, in your household, with your friends. Look, if something is not okay with you, if something is not supporting your direction, your purpose, something is not going to aid with actually going to hurt your relationship with God, regardless of how good you feel, you know what I'm saying? Regardless of how good things are going, that should not be a license for your boundaries to drop. You get what I'm saying? For example, though I would never tell anybody that it's worth dying about, like how some guys try to go, as a man, something that is very, very important to us and honestly very important to how we're able to lead is our respect. Now, yes, respect is gained and nurtured through consistent action that is respectable, but there's also a conversation of what you allow, right? If you don't like being called sassy, I know there was like this phase or this thing, it might still be going on in some places, where whenever a man would speak up against something or speak up and say, hey, this isn't cool, that's not cool, X, Y, and Z, he would be called sassy. And I know a lot of guys, they just hated that to bits. I mean, me, I don't really, I wouldn't call myself sassy. Am I going to be all the pieces somebody else call me sassy? Not really. But the thing about it is, case when say that's your boundary in your household, like, we don't call men sassy because it can Just give a connotation, a perception of, femininity, which isn't something that, we necessarily endorse. Okay. That's a boundary that should be across the board. Don't just say, oh, because I'm feeling good today, my wife can make a joke about sassiness, or my daughter can call my son sassy, or you have friends over and they can call you sassy, call your kid sassy, whatever. Your boundary should not move just because of the room, the circumstance, how things are going. If it's your boundary, it needs to be consistent. See, a lot of times we find our boundaries not being respected, but it's because we don't respect them. If your boundary will move just because you're feeling good, if your boundary will move just because things are going well and the energy is light, then that means that the boundary in and of itself honestly probably isn't that serious to begin with. If something is your boundary, if something is worth, protecting or structuring, right? You know what I'm saying? It should be that, and it needs to be that all the time. Now, I don't want to give the connotation that there's no nuance when it comes to certain types of boundary, but I'm just saying I've seen too many people, I've seen too many husbands, and I've seen too many men. We get in a moment where we feel good or things are light and we let stuff slide. Sometimes people like to wait until things are going well to try to pull your card. And I'm letting you know now that a boundary worth having should not flop just because things are feeling good. And then the third thing that I need you to understand about these boundaries, right? It is that real boundaries, or boundaries worth having rather, they should be in support of your relationship with Christ, number one. And then number two, in support of your purpose. The boundaries that you put into place should be things that are pushing you closer to who you're supposed to be, where you're supposed to be, and what you're supposed to be doing, right? Your boundaries should be putting you out of the way of toxic and mediocre people and putting you into the presence of good, encouraging, and productive people that can actually add value to your walk, right? Your boundaries should put you in the way of things that feed your mind and feed your spirit and help refine you, rather than allowing things or putting you in the way of other things that could weigh on your spirit, weigh on your mind, distract you. You get what I'm saying? Now, if you are going to set boundaries, which I definitely recommend that you should be putting up boundaries against things that do these things. You want to put up boundaries against things that feed your lust, feed your pride, and feed your ego. You also want to put up boundaries against things that cause doubt, that cause shame, and that cause fear. And I say most of all, especially in this scrolling social media era that I'm also a 100% victim of, you want to put up boundaries against things that cause laziness. If you notice, I'm not saying put up boundaries against a certain type of person. I'm not saying put up boundaries against a certain type of thing, because that can all be nuanced and changed. I'm telling you to put up boundaries against spirits, because the thing about it is those spirits that are going to adversely affect you. People change just like the temperature. People change just like the seasons. One day they're good, one day they're bad, one day they're in the middle. I'm so sick of people being in this situation where they're like, just write off this person, I'm cutting them off, da 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 da. Look, man, people can and oftentimes do change. I would never tell you to go against what Christ has called you to do, which is to love and love the way that Christ loved, which ultimately always leaves the door open for a repentant heart to come back home. However, what you must also do is with these boundaries, right? You're putting them up against spirits that are going to contaminate your purpose and your walk. That could be cancerous to your spirit and inevitably harm the consistency and the effectiveness of the work of your hands in pursuit of your God-given purpose and path. And so if you are going to summarize all of this today, what I need you to understand is that there are two types of boundaries. There are good boundaries and there are bad boundaries. The difference is good boundaries help you, bad boundaries keep you caged and weak. One of the easiest ways to set up good boundaries is to set them up against things that will hurt, harm, slow down, or block you from being able to walk in your God-given purpose and achieve the goals that you have set for yourself. Once again, my name is Avery Taylor. This is the Larger Than Logic podcast, and I am so glad you have allowed me to be a part of your journey.